And that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Like if there is a wound
Yes.
as a church, we have to be able to address that. We can't
Absolutely.
just pretend
Absolutely.
it didn't exist. We can't
100%.
just, that almost like that autopilot you were talking about before, just kind of continuing on. Like, sure, there's a survival instinct that will kick in, that we'll just keep going as we did because we don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
But there has to be something else that comes in.
If we don't talk about it, we don't know that we're not alone in our feelings.
Yeah.
We just think everyone else looks unaffected. Everyone looks
Right.
fine.
Right.
I must be oversensitive.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Living Fullness. I'm Stina Constantine, and joining me on this week's episode is Father Sean Burns and Grace Morey. Each week on the podcast, you'll hear us chat about a range of topics from virtue to relationships, comments on cultural shifts and lessons we're learning as we go along, and we are so delighted to have you join us. So sit back and enjoy being part of a conversation with a few friends. Hello, Padre and Grace. How are we going?
Good.
Yeah, going well, thank you.
That's the way. We probably should introduce that we have a guest in the room today.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a co-host, Grace Morey, with us. She's part of the Virtue Ministry team, our prayer coordinator. I'll let you introduce yourself, Grace.
Sure. Well, I don't really feel like a guest. I mean, I am, but
No.
I mean,
No, we
I
have
feel
another
very
guest in the
familiar
room.
with the
You
two
need
of
no
you.
introduction. However, there is
have
one
a
that does
guest in
need
the
an
room.
introduction though.
Yeah, so my little daughter Evangeline is with us today. So she's just leaving crumbs on the floor of Father's room and playing with her toys and
It's fine.
just seeing what else she can get into.
Yeah.
So you might
great
hear her
day.
contributing to the conversation throughout
Yes.
today's
That's
episode.
fine. That's fine. And my office will have seen worse. Don't worry about it. So
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's probably been graced by her presence anyway.
Exactly. That's right.
So I guess before we sort of begin this particular episode, this is a bit of a very different episode to what we've had in the past. So if you're listening to this, you will hear the tone of this episode will sound very different. And the reason for that is because we're talking about something that's quite sensitive and quite painful as well, and it's been a point of silence that we've felt in the church. So all three of us have kind of experienced some level of impact because of what we're going to talk about in today's episode. So I guess we've titled this particular episode When the Shepherd Leaves His Flock, and really we're talking about when priests and pastors leave, whatever reason that might be, and have left their role and the impact that has on those of us who remain within the church. So this is not something we've spoken about here before, and this is something all three of us have experienced in some way. I have had a personal experience of in some way. So I guess the caveat that I just want to start with in this particular episode is that we won't be focusing on any particular story. So you won't hear us kind of pull apart anyone's story as such. We're not here to point fingers. We're not here to blame or justify anyone's decisions or a reason why pastors might leave the church. But what we do want to do is open up a space where we can talk about the impact that has and how do we kind of move forward from there. So to kind of start with then, maybe we just open up with what have you noticed about this space in general?
Well, I guess the main thing I've noticed is that we don't talk about it much. Yeah, I certainly haven't been part of a conversation like this before with this specific focus. When there is a situation where a pastor or a priest leaves, people don't really know what to say, and life is busy for most of us. The ministries need to continue. We need to keep going with our masses every weekend, and the ministries have to roll on, keep going with the sacraments and everything. So life sort of continues and we push forward. And I think when I've been in situations of this nature, I think as I reflect, I don't think I've stopped to talk about it properly. I think I've pressed on for many reasons.
Yeah.
And it's painful. It brings up emotions and feelings that I don't know how to deal with necessarily, or I don't feel like I should be feeling them. I feel like I'm not really personally affected by this, so I should be okay, which is not necessarily the case. But
Nor would you be alone in that feeling. I imagine you would be feeling a similar kind of thing.
The pain you talk about is very real, and it's experienced across all quarters of the church. It's I kind of have I see teaching in the seminary, being among other priests, and also being among the laity in a parish. I can see pain across all quarters, right? I mean, there's seminarians who are in pain. There's the laity who are experiencing the pain of a pastor who's departed, and also priests as well. I mean, it's like a brother has left the family, and so it's definitely a real pain present there. Yeah, there's no question. And in some ways, I don't know where else to go with that except to say that it's utterly painful. It's something that it's a conversation that isn't presently being had. It is quite painful, and I think that as you've sort of said to us, Grace, that the expectation is that we just kind of march on without really having had the conversation. There is some measure of secrecy there. And
it can feel like
that anyway.
Just because of the silence.
And that's right.
It's just such a gap. There's nothing available, necessarily structured available, nothing.
Yeah.
No kind of precedent, if you will. Like there's sort of no way of knowing how anyone should react in this space or how anyone should feel in this space. So you're kind of just left with these big emotions and a whole group of people, both laity and clergy, a bit at a loss of what do we do with these big emotions.
That's right. Just to double back then on point that was made, you're quite right. It's not that there's a purposeful secrecy that's going on. It's not as though there's a conspiracy to remain, to keep things silent. But because there's no conversation around it, it can feel as though there's a certain level of secrecy there, and that this sort of shouldn't be spoken about almost. And nothing could be further from the truth. I think this actually requires us, if there's a wound in a family, the way that the family heals is by acknowledging the existence of the wound and being able to talk to each other about it, and not by sweeping it under the rug or pretending that it doesn't exist. The conversation has to
name the pain.
Yeah.
So I guess then carrying on from what you're saying there then, Father, what are the impacts that we're both experiencing and seeing then as a result of this perpetual silence in this space?
I think for me, maybe reflecting on this, I think it's meant that I've experienced a sense of loss or being left or being abandoned. And that's brought on, different emotions in me and different feelings in myself that I haven't spoken about and haven't named, haven't acknowledged. And then I've sort of just pushed through and moved on. And then I think affects me in different ways kind of later on. Even I think as just in the normal way, priests are moved between parishes and they're leaving, but they're going to another parish because that's a normal thing that happens.
Yep.
When that happens, I'm like a bit hypersensitive to that and like, I can't handle another. Like, that's one thing I've noticed. I think so. Yeah, I kind of don't realise. I do hear, but I don't realise it's actually. And I don't know whether to say this now but I think reflecting on the feelings that it's brought about in myself, it's similar to feelings to what I would have experienced had my own father left me. Because that's essentially what's happening. It's on a different level, but it's a priest is someone who is a spiritual father, head of your family, parish family or what have you.
Yeah.
And so for them to leave, it does leave you feeling abandoned.
I just want to acknowledge what you were saying before in terms of when that priest or that pastor might get moved for a particular reason, like they may have somewhere else that they need to go and serve. There is a pain point because you've built a relationship with this person. You've grown. There's a lot of work that's had to go in to build a trusting relationship, and then they get moved. There is a sadness in that, and I think that sadness is good and healthy, like for both the clergymen and for the lay people to experience that, because I think it says something about the genuineness of the relationship that existed there. But it is a whole other thing to watch someone just leave without having necessarily another place that they're going to serve because they've left for whatever the reasons might be. There is a whole other level of abandonment that comes with that. There's much deeper seated pain points that come out because it's not just that, well, this is a regular reoccurring thing that happens. People get moved around from time to time. This is very unfamiliar. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's unexpected.
Yeah.
You end up with a lot of questions too. I did. Yeah, questions about why and how could this happen and how could this happen with someone so amazing or so holy or so whatever.
Yeah.
And then, questions about even God's will and like their pastoral ministry, which I've experienced, like what does that mean for all of that?
Yeah, what now happens to all of the things that had been started or were in the progress? Does everything go on pause? Does everything keep going? What's the right thing to do here? What's the okay thing to do here? Because the person who would ordinarily be leading that is no longer there.
One of the things that needs to be really, really inculcated into seminary formation and into priests as a matter of ongoing formation is that the title of father is not for our benefit, that it is for the benefit of the people of of God, and it bespeaks a relationship. And just like a father who leaves his family, there is going to be pain that comes from that, because father-son, father-daughter relationship has in some way, shape or form been ruptured.
Yeah.
And so it's always going to have that very painful effect.
Yeah. And I guess this is the other thing that I suppose probably frustrates me about this silence is we talk about all the fathers. So we're talking about a very much like family dynamic here. And yet if we were to think about, that abandonment you were talking about, Grace, and if a father was to leave that family, for whatever reason, the pain that is left behind for that family to endure, it's almost like the family is left alone to their own devices with no one stepping in, not even as a family unit. It's like the individuals are left to themselves to just deal.
Yeah.
Which is not how a family dynamic would work. When someone leaves the family, even temporarily, that family unit is meant to come together in some way to be able to maintain that family.
Sure.
And yet we don't have that. At the moment, it's just because of that silence, there's such a void that there's just so much isolation and so much wounding that has happened. Like the wound has happened from that abandonment, or rather the wound has caused a sense of abandonment. But then that sense of isolation that we continue to perpetuate in this silence actually just continues to re-wound us. There's that keeps happening as well.
And to extend an olive branch, as it were, if there's anyone who's listening to this podcast who is an ex-pastor or is an ex-priest, regardless of the denomination that you belong to, there may well have been some very compelling reason as to why you left the active ministry. And I don't want to say that isn't the case.
Sure.
There may well have been a very compelling reason as to why you left the active ministry. But I don't think any compelling reason, no matter how just it may be, removes the reality of scandal and hurt. It's there. That's just how it is.
And that needs to be addressed. Like if there is a wound as a church, we have to be able to address that. We can't just pretend it didn't exist. We can't 100%. Just, that almost like that autopilot you were talking about before, just kind of continuing on. Like, sure, there's a survival instinct that will kick in, that we'll just keep going as we did because we don't know what else to do. But there has to be something else that comes in.
If we don't talk about it, we don't know that we're not alone in our feelings. We just think everyone else looks unaffected. Everyone looks fine. I must be oversensitive because I'm feeling this way.
Which becomes just another rewounding. Like then it becomes all of the same stuff that comes up. Like
and I think it was a question for me too. Like even if I were to go and talk to someone about it or open up a conversation or that kind of thing, who do I go to? Like, do I go to a new priest who's come to fill in this other guy's shoes, who's just, been thrown in the deep end and is going to be completely snowed under and busy, and I don't know him, I've got no relationship necessarily. So do I go and talk to him? I'm not feeling like that's my go-to. So then do I just talk to, like
where do you go?
Where do I go? Where do I go? Other friends or other parishioners? Often with these things, it can be, I don't know whether there is necessarily, but I also don't want to gossip about this with other people.
No, exactly.
And I know that if I go to, a bunch of other women from the parish, myself included, that's...
it makes it really hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where do you go to have this conversation? It's almost like there sort of needs to be a bit of a culture change in some sense.
And because often, and this is my experience, the person who I would have gone to is the person who's left.
Yes,
exactly.
Who I have no way of contacting.
Yes.
Who I don't know his role anymore in my life. He's not my father anymore. What do you do with that?
That's hard. That's hard.
And I think that we can probably learn from other Christian communities, certainly. My husband's background, I know that his former church has a lot of wonderful ways of connecting people and linking older couples with younger couples so that they've got that pastoral relationship with other members of the congregation. It's not just all falling on the one pastor or certain people. They've got beautiful ways of connecting couples and families and singles so that there's a sort of formal arrangement so that you do have someone you can talk to about these things in a confidential sort of way, not just a gossip session with whoever. It's like someone you can go to and, you've already got that agreement in place, like you're my go-to person.
There's a certain sense in which, that will actually be very helpful. So I think Protestant communities are quite brilliant at that. I think they're more than together, but there's lots of variations. But generally speaking, I think they normally are quite good at that. But it strikes me also so that there's a learning that can take place for our Catholic Church, but also there's a uniqueness to our situation insofar as the relationship is sort of sacramentally cemented.
It's not just like a human to human relationship. No,
there's sort of there's mediation of the divine that's occurred there, and it's quite incredible. And so the relationship is often very
when I was reflecting on this, I was thinking about what was I experiencing when this happened to me. Okay, my emotions were similar to that I would have experienced if my own father had left me. Why were my emotions so strong? Why did I have a sense of abandonment? And it's partly because father, the priest, is there for you as a father, but also in the most kind of, he's acting as Christ in the most important, sometimes most intimate moments of your life, like going to confessing and, experiencing reconciliation is a very powerful, very intimate, profound experience. The priest, experiencing marriage, or all of it, baptized,
yes, of course.
They might have baptized your child or receiving, your first Holy Communion, whatever. Like those are really such powerful moments in your life, and there is that awesome experience of Christ ministering to you through them. And so whether we feel like that was a profound experience or not, it was a profound experience, like that took place. Like whether we had a really friendly relationship with them or not, whether we knew them well, whether we talked to them that much, all of that adds. But even if a priest who left was a priest who only administered these sacraments to you and you didn't have much outside of that, that's actually still...
It's profound.
Yeah, right? Like that's profound. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. There is something unique in that. But still, all that being said, whether you're a Protestant or a Catholic, when your pastor leaves, it's always hard. It's always difficult. And for us, we feel that unique situation of the sacramental relationship. But I would like to say some of the seminarians, I know some of them listen, if for no other reason than to try and score brownie points on the exam. I know that it's tempting to look at the men who've left and to go, well, if they couldn't make it, how on earth can I make it?
Yeah.
Like, surely I might as well throw in the towel now.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the right way to look at this. There is no such thing as the perfect priest. Well, no, let me rephrase that. There is such thing as a perfect priest. He's in heaven. His name is Jesus Christ. Here on earth, there is no such thing as a perfect priest. And we're all sinners. We're all in need of God's mercy. And so if you are faithful to your spiritual life, to your prayers, if you ensure that you connect with others, that you're not isolated, you have good human companionship among brother priests and among laity, then you'll be in a place where you've got people to turn to when things go awry. You've got a spiritual life which is active and alive that you can constantly be drawing nourishment from. I'm not saying everything's going to be dandy, but you will be able to be a priest through the ups and downs and horrors and joys of this earthly life, because it's not just depending on you.
Yeah.
One of my friends, Father Scott Armstrong, he has a friend who helps priests who've gone off the rails get back on the rails. And he has this point. He says that it's the same story every time. They let their prayers go or they let their relationships go.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah.
So don't let your prayers go and don't let your relationships go.
Yeah. That's a way of trying to safeguard the office, I suppose.
Yeah. Safeguarding the office and living the office, right? Because that's, it's not just about safeguarding it. There's actually a way to live it and to live it positively and fruitfully. And that's in prayerful relationship with Jesus and in appropriate relationship with brothers and sisters in Christ. That's the way that this relationship is lived and this state of life is lived. So I think that's...
I think too, though, extrapolating from what you're saying there in terms of the experience of what seminarians may be facing in light of an experience like that, a similar kind of thing happens when you have someone who has been, a great witness, who has been someone who's been, maybe a great example in a particular area. So maybe they've been, really intellectual or really great, like in the pastoral space or really good in the spiritual space or whatever. And if you're trying to emulate that, you can have, even without being a seminarian, you can have a space where in this kind of an environment where there is silence, nothing kind of feeding into it, into this vacuum, seeds of doubt can start to sow in that space. And you can ask in the similar kinds of questions. Well, if that man couldn't hold on to his faith, if that man who was, I held on this particular high level, if he's changed his mind, if he no longer believes this, well, then what does that say for me?
Absolutely. And look, not everyone who leaves the priesthood or leaves the exercise of the ministry is actually going to leave the faith. Those two things don't necessarily correlate, but it does happen. And when that does happen, I get that.
And I guess a second thing that I've also noticed, just, kind of living in the world, it's really embarrassing is not quite the right word, but, it's as close as I can get. When you have something like this that happens, where they leave, the rest of the world knows that it's happened, that have anything to kind of know about the church. They're aware when a pastor leaves, there's a gaping hole. What happened there? There are so many questions, and you're standing there going, I don't know. One, because I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, and I don't need to know the ins and outs of what happened, but I can't even tell you anything. Like, I've got no response. Unlike any other kind of faith-related question that they might come to you with, you can say, oh, well, you know, it might be this or it might be that, or this is what I know, or if I don't know, I can go and find out. But you can't even do that in this space. You can't say, oh, let me go find out for you, because who are you going to go to? Like you said before, Grace, where are we going to go for answers? There are none here.
Oh,
so
definitely.
Not only are you isolated, but then trying to be a witness in the world in this space.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Really
I think embarrassed is the best word that I can find, because I felt that whether I should or not. If I was more humble, I probably wouldn't. But especially as someone who you're always trying to live the joy of the gospel, communicate how amazing this faith is, and I'm always trying to share, the goodness of my faith with everyone I meet, and especially, my friends who don't know God, or my friends who are Christian and not Catholic. I'm always trying to, kind of evangelize and share the goodness of it. And then it's like, something happens that causes scandal and might look really bad, and it's like, oh, what do I say? What do I do? As if there's not enough stuff I have to try and explain. Being a Catholic, come on.
If there
because we're such a massive sort of, as the humans in the church, so big and disorganised. It's like we're big old shipwreck, beautiful, but it's not as clean as some of my Protestant brothers and sisters' little congregational churches that, when you're bringing friends to mass and you don't know, you haven't been to this parish before and you're not sure what to expect, and you're like, oh, come with me. And it's that,
100%. And to try and maybe speak into that just a touch, when stuff like that's come up, I always bring people back to the nascent church, to the newly formed church, Jesus Christ and his 12 apostles. Not long after the Last Supper, our Lord is arrested, and let's look at the 12. One betrays him, one denies him, 9 abandon him, and 1 sticks around. So what it demonstrates is human weakness. And these moments go to show that the church's teaching around woundedness, around human weakness and failing, all of that stuff stands so abundantly clear, and none of us are immune from it. It doesn't matter what your vocation is. You could be the Pope and you're still a weak man in need of God's mercy, and in need of continual conversion, in need of relationship, in need of prayer. And if these things go missing, then life is going to take a downturn quickly. So I point people back to that reality that, look, it is a bit embarrassing, and it is. I think embarrassment is a perfectly valid thing to feel. Yes, it is a bit embarrassing, but let's remember too, this is a human condition without Christ. The human condition without Christ is inability to thrive in one's vocation, or even before that, to discern thoroughly one's vocation.
So I guess going from there, then, one of the things that's really important for us in terms of healing then is to always make sure that our gaze is focused back on Christ. And so we don't become distracted, as painful as our experience is of it, that doesn't become the sole focus of our day, that it's not the pain, but it's Christ who wants to heal us in and through that pain that we have to put our eyes back onto. But what else can, in terms of community even, what else do you think we could be doing that might help in this space, or some thoughts on where do we even kind of begin?
I would say a few things. I think your questions, Dina, what is it that we can do as a community? I think just that word community is important. We are a community. We are a body of Christ, and it's important not to stay alone. I need brothers and sisters. I think checking in on each other is really important. I remember when I was at uni, and one of those moments that I just remember like it was yesterday, one of my friends who, I don't know, atheist or agnostic, I'm not sure, lovely, lovely girl and a great friend, but definitely not Catholic. We were in the car and she said to me, Grace, just checking, are you okay? And I was like, oh, yeah, why wouldn't I be? And she's like, oh, I've been watching the news. And I'm like, oh, what have you seen in the news? And she's like, oh, Pope Benedict resigned. That was a bit unexpected, wasn't it? How are you feeling? I was like, that wasn't the news. I mean, different. But I was so touched that she checked in to make sure I was okay.
Isn't that beautiful?
So touched. Yeah. And so, just checking in on each other is really important. And that little, car trip I always remember. And I think too, too, like, well, yeah, as you said, Stina, remembering that it is Jesus who heals us, and God our Father in heaven is the Father that ultimately we all long for. That's why I'm wounded if my father leaves me, whether that be earthly father or spiritual father, or the father wounds exist because we are in need of a perfect father, because we're created as his children, and that's what we're all longing for, and he's the only one that can ultimately fulfill that. So
That's
important,
right.
like running to chapel and spending time in his presence and letting him just love us as his children. I know that it's tempting to try and sort of grip onto things or think, well, and I've seen it in myself and I've seen in others, try and find a community within the church, find a parish or find a movement or find a particular mass that is going to be really, really solid and never crumble. And this will, if I just go to this mass, this is the real deal. This is these people, that priest, so solid. I'm good here.
Yeah.
And to a degree, that's okay. I'm not saying you shouldn't discern which mass to go to. It's important to feed yourself spiritually, but definitely you can take it to, I'm one of Father so-and-so's flock.
Yeah.
And which is, it's not going to heal us. And as you've said, Father, none of us are immune. Like once we start trusting in our human abilities, like it's not going to be solid forever.
I would shout out to my brother priests 2 things. Firstly, open up a conversation with your parishioner. And there's a story in the United States of a priest who left active ministry and returned. He left active ministry because he had developed an issue with alcohol, and he needed to have that sort of space to go and get help, right? To go to a thank you. That's what I'm looking for, a rehab centre. And it was quite secret, right? It was a profound level of privacy there that the bishop was hell-bent on respecting, saying, look, he's gone away for health reasons and seeking some help. He will return, but his father so he gave some context around it without saying the exact issue. Now, what that priest did, though, upon his return, is that he then spoke to his parishioners and he said, so I've been away and his wife been away.
Yeah.
And he opened up a conversation to say, now, this is what happened. That's a whole other level of vulnerability I don't think we're necessarily at as a church yet.
Yeah, sure.
And great healing was to come from him doing that. I think what it generally tells us is that if we're able to just sit with our people and go, hey, I can't tell you the particulars around it, probably because I don't know the particulars around the issue, but I can sit with you and I can hear you. Open up that conversation. We're willing to be vulnerable with our people and say, yep, I'm hurting too.
Yeah.
I'm hurting as well. Yeah. That's a really good space to be in. The second thing I'd recommend for we clergy is to say, well, keep our friendships and prayers, keep them consistent. It's activism is such an easy thing to fall into. We are busy people. There's stuff that's always going on. And in some places, there are days at the cathedral where I feel more like a business manager than a priest. Yeah. It's in that sense, I know how easy it is to fall into activism and we can't do it. The minute that we fall into activism, we're in danger zone. Yeah. And so I think that's the other thing I'd just say is brother priests, we need to be really concerned with keeping up our spiritual lives and our good, solid relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd also say don't be afraid to reach out to people outside of your immediate community as well, because everyone in your immediate community will be hurting. Yeah. So I can appreciate that will be really hard to go to another person who's already hurting and in this space, and how do you kind of ask them to hold this space? So it's okay to kind of step outside of that and go to someone who might belong to a different parish and be like, hey, this is what's going on. This is really hard for me. Can you just hold space for me whilst I kind of grieve, or whilst I'm angry, or whilst I'm frustrated, or whilst I cry, or, all this stuff that it brings up for me. Can you just hold some space for me? Like, we're meant to be there. Like, for a family unit, we're meant to be there for each other. Yes. So we can do that for each other without feeling like we have to have the solutions.
Right.
And we don't need solutions to be able to hold space for someone. We just kind of accept them for who they are, what they come with, as they come day to day.
Yeah, and I think prayer and human connection is especially for priests, but for all of us, all of the baptized. And I think, specifically with prayer, I think reflecting on my own experience, I think I can see, I know prayer is important. I know I have to persist with it. And it's these more tender sort of times that I'm going to say would have been helpful for me to focus on, okay, I'm feeling like this. I feel like my father's abandoned me. How can God father me? Like, how am I going to have time and space every day for God to father me? Rather than, okay, got to keep up my prayers, got to keep going with my prayers because even prayer can become too active, or it can become rote, or, there's lots of things that can happen with prayer. So being really specific and intentional about, okay, well, I know prayer is important. How do I pray during this time so that God can love me, father me, heal me? And that will look different for different people, but taking time to actually reflect on how am I praying in this time?
Yeah. You remind me of that vulnerability, of bringing that vulnerability to Christ, because that's where intimacy grows with him. Like it grows when we are able to be honest about and real and raw about, okay, well, this is where I'm at today, Lord. So like encounter me in this. That's all I got today.
Realness.
Yeah.
Authenticity, so important before God and with each other. And even coming back to that point about like, it's embarrassing for the people I'm trying to evangelize to, but that's okay too. Like we're being authentic with everyone and to say to people, yes, this happened and I don't know why and I don't have answers and I'm hurting, but I'm letting God heal me and this is what God is doing for me in this moment. And our church is a hospital, it's not a museum. That authenticity is what we don't have a perfect church to give to people. In one sense we do, but in the other sense, I know I can see your face, Father.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, we don't have a museum. We don't have a museum, to share with people. We have what we have. And that's okay. And too, like the father wounds are prevalent. Like so many people, most people have sadly some kind of father wound in their life.
Both within and outside of the church.
In and outside of the church, whether it be with their, most commonly, from their biological father, but there's other figures too. And so recognising that, this suffering actually unites me to others in that way and maybe will help me grow in compassion and, God will use that.
Definitely.
In his own mysterious and beautiful way.
He can use that if we can cooperate with that. Through this space, definitely. And I guess that would be the last thing I would say for this topic is that it can be so easy to become defensive and closed off in and through that hurt and pain, and it's so important that we remain open to whatever comes next, like whatever God puts in our path, whatever spiritual ways we have to change in order to adapt to this particular, season that we're going through, the connections that we might need to make or put more in, time and energy into because of this particular season or whatever it might be, just to be open to that God will provide exactly, because as you said, if this is a space that we are willing to cooperate with him to allow further healing for us so that we can then encounter other people more effectively and with greater compassion and with greater love, then he will give us what we need to get through this season well. But we need to first be open to that. And it's so easy to become closed off.
To tighten our grip. Keep holding it all together. Keep up a facade or
or just become so untrusting because we've been hurt. So it's really important to stay open, and also for the next person who comes to fill those shoes. We'll never be able to fill them the same way, but for the next person that comes in, that we not over bombard them with expectation, but also that we don't close ourselves off because we've been hurt, that we do actually reopen ourselves back up to a new relationship to allow that to be built.
Absolutely. It does bring up the topic of clericalism to some degree, is that, there can be a sense in which the priest can put himself or others can put him on a pedestal and that this person's shoes are too big to fill sort of thing. You're like, well, actually, no, it's just that their shoes and somebody else's shoes are going to be there at some stage. Like the priesthood is a remarkable mystery and it's one that I'm constantly grateful for, but we've got to be so careful that we don't throw people onto pedestals and expect perfection, imply perfection, or it's just not helpful and it's not realistic. It makes vulnerability almost absolutely impossible because there is no authenticity that you're talking about.
Well, thanks for joining me for a rather sensitive conversation that we've been able to have today. I know there's lots of things that we could have talked about, there's so much in this space. And so for you who's listening as well, I can appreciate that some of this might have been really hard for you. Some of it may have touched you emotionally as well. There might be certain experiences you're recalling. Please do what you have to do. Connect with people to help yourself in that space. Bring that vulnerability to God as well. And if you want to share your experiences with us, we're always open to hearing sharing as well. So get in touch with us using our social media handles, or if you know us, come and talk to us. We always love it when you come and speak to us, and we're happy to hold that space for you in a conversation to just hear what you have to say. This, like, we're done with the silence. Or I'm done with the silence.
Yeah.
So
100%.
we'll hold that space for you. So to end this particular episode then, maybe a truth, beauty and goodness to kind of lift things back up again. Is there something that comes to mind for you, Grace?
Yeah, sure. So my truth, beauty and goodness is the adoration playgroup in my parish, which was started by my friend. It's just the most genius, best idea that anyone's ever had, I think. So basically we meet every week and the playgroup goes for 2 hours, and in the first hour we're blessed enough to have an adoration chapel in our parish. In the first hour, half the mums go to the chapel and get to pray, and we leave our children with the other mums, and then we swap. So anyway, it's so simple but so beautiful because it's just like a normal play group, which is great because the kids can play together and you get to see the other mums. But then it's like you get this hour of prayer in the chapel to yourself.
That's really cool.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I have one daughter, but the mums with lots of kids, it's like, it's like so sacred to get that time. Yeah, such a good idea.
That is a good idea.
Adoration playgroup.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Genius.
brilliant.
Yes,
Yes,
indeed,
such
indeed.
a simple
Absolutely.
concept.
I cannot believe we have not done this before.
Indeed. Brilliant concept. It's a brilliant concept. What about you, Stina?
For me, it was a online retreat that I took part in just a couple of weeks ago. It was by Wild at Heart. It was only lasted like 2 or 3 hours, but it was such a beautiful way to just step outside of my working week, step into a slowed down way of starting the weekend. And they had a beautiful meditation that they led us through as well, which was pretty awesome too. What about you, Padre?
Well, now, strictly speaking, I meant to give you a resource because that is per the instruction of Virtue Ministries founder. But
It's a suggestion. It's not an
but
instruction.
I've just asked Bishop. I've never been good at taking instructions, so
okay.
I'm changing mine
Okay.
to Evangeline because she's just been the sweetest little bundle of joy while we're here in podcasting. And if you could bring her in each time we do so, it'd be great.
It's very sweet.
Yeah, you've been a delight to have, Evangeline,
My
and you've
word.
been so patient with us. My goodness. Oh, now you're going to be
Oh,
quiet.
now you go right. Yeah.
Just a bit shy for the moment.
Oh, she is such a joy.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
How
She lives
wonderful.
up to her name.
Yes.
Evangelizer.
Yeah, my word.
Well, thanks for joining us as well
Thank
this
you
week,
so much,
Grace.
Tina.
Really
Thank you,
awesome
Father.
to have you as a co-host.
wonderful.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's been a
very
delight.
good.
And thank you guys for joining us for this week's episode. We will catch you again next week, but until then, know of our love and prayers.